Today's topic is project management and fundraising. And I appreciate everyone joining this call and your time for sharing your journey and strategies which worked out for you. So before we start the Q&A, I'd like to do a quick round of introduction. So hi everyone, I am Mayur Mistry. I'm the project manager of this team and I'm a master's in architecture grad student.
Hi, I'm Rose Carroll. I worked on the sponsorship team as well as the photovoltaic and electrical team.
Hi, I'm Nava. I am the sponsorship director for this team, and I'm also a senior in architecture.
Hi, my name is Haley. I am the current treasurer and I am a sophomore in civil engineering.
Awesome. So my first question to you guys is what were some difficulties you faced while contacting sponsors? What were some techniques which worked out for you, and some tips for future members to contact sponsors?
So I think one of the biggest challenges when contacting the sponsors was initially at first trying to get a hold of someone. Um, it did not help just cold calling email, not cold emailing to the companies when they only had an email that was, say, just their generic email. So instead of doing that, what helped a lot is when we started cold calling and we were able to talk directly to someone. And then from there, they were able to give a contact information for a specific person at the company. So that proved out to be the most efficient way for sponsorship. In my experience with working with the photovoltaic and electrical equipment.
Yeah, and if you can elaborate on, so when you call to the particular company, did you share the specific project information and product you are interested, or you started with a generic call and found out the person who is responsible for marketing team and then did the pitch?
Yeah, so when I first called, I just kind of pitched what Adapt House was and what we were doing, and also included that we were donating the home to Habitat for Humanity because that is a huge aspect about our project. And then I would just kind of ramble, and then some people might have stopped me and been like, okay, wait, I'm going to point you to this person. Or I'd talk to it and they'd kind of ask me a few questions about the project. Some people were really interested in it. And then from there, they would give me the person to talk to next, either whether it's a phone call or an email.
I see. I would like to ask Nava, since you have been involved in a project for more than a year and maintained relationship with sponsors, what are some things which were helpful to maintain a good relationship with them, and some tips?
Yeah, I think like two things off the bat is don't I think like doing due diligence in terms of tracking emails. We ran into some issues when team members would email the same person twice, and then the contact person would get like upset. So just making sure that we're polite and we have the right etiquette. I also calling people by the right name was a big thing. Um, I would also say like emailing between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. A lot of students I know are really busy during that time, so we scheduled emails, and you can schedule an email anytime for any other time. So you can like at midnight schedule an email for 8 a.m. And that was just really helpful in maintaining our professionalism.
Yeah, and I recall like you maintained a spreadsheet with all the information, so with also the point of contact from our team, which was quite helpful. In, can you elaborate on the sponsorship booklet you prepared?
Yeah, so we had a sponsorship packet, and it lists the benefits of partnering with us as well as like the sponsorship levels. So determining how much some like a financial sponsor would give us a certain amount of money, they would be a certain level, or a product donation would be a certain level. So that really helped like categorize, and we could easily explain to sponsors what they're looking at and how much they wanted to give. And also summarized our project really well. We also had an architecture presentation that had some renderings and other sponsors. So just like a brief kind of a thorough explanation of who we are and what we're looking for and how they can help and how we can benefit them.
Yeah. So like to conclude it, apart from like cold call, like calling the companies, having a 10-page booklet which gives a good impression about the project and the past sponsors, builds up credibility for the team, and that definitely helps. And many times getting one or two big names at the early stage can also get more sponsors coming in because they want to maintain those relationships. Good. Before I go to Haley, I would like to ask Jonah if you can introduce yourself and uh, briefly share uh, what were the challenges in terms of project management and fundraising you uh, faced while starting this project.
Okay. Hey, so this is like recorded for future folks. Is that the idea here?
Yeah, it's live streamed now and also being recorded.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so my name is Jonah Messinger. I was president of ISD last year and vice president the year prior when we started the project. I would say one of the important things that we did that we probably could have honestly done better was very early on sort of have meetings and let people in sort of senior campus leadership positions know that this was happening. I think the part of the problem is that it's sort of hard to demonstrate that credibility until there's real sort of meat on the bone, if you will. So like, we had meetings with, head of departments and stuff like that. Sorry, what was the specific question again?
Yeah, so let me be specific. So tell us about first is setting up relationship with the university because we had to start this project after a long time. And then what were some key sponsors we had this in this project and what strategy worked out to get those sponsors?
Gotcha. Okay. So, at the end of the day, I think a lot of it has to be sort of student initiated. Yeah, I'm okay. So I on the university front, when we were doing this, we had been doing solar decathlon internationally for the previous two competitions and hadn't done a US solar decathlon in a long time. And part of that was, I think, a liability concern from the university perspective. And so we had basically been partnering more or less with other universities internationally, and so that the home was actually owned by the other university, if that makes sense. So it wasn't actually owned by UIUC, and that kind of allowed UIUC to sort of not have liability there. We obviously wanted to come back. We wanted to come back to the US competition. And so, it was challenging in that working through sort of the regulatory process from a bottom up perspective is, it's a challenging thing to do. And, early on when I was a vice president and Michael Cooper was president, he had sort of foreseen this coming and was basically, his plan was to make a nonprofit that was completely distinct from the university, distinct from the student organization, Illinois Solar Decathlon. And and the idea being that the home would be actually owned and executed and built, et cetera, by the nonprofit. And we weren't sort of sold on that at that point, but that was sort of what he foresaw being the best solution. I tried to spend basically the fall of 2019 with Akash Jain, who was the sort of sponsorship head of sponsorship at the time. We had spent a lot of time trying to work through sort of the, like the bureaucracy of a large university to get necessary approvals. It was very challenging. At that point, Akash had also done a great job at getting us connections with big firms like Skender and Thornton Tomasetti, which was useful like technically, but it was also useful in that these were like really large, respectable firms that give you a lot of credibility. Like I think you were talking about when I had just joined. So that was one of the really important things he had done. But convincing the university. So when I say even convincing the university, it's not even the right way of phrasing it, because it wasn't that we needed to convince the university. It was that working sort of from a bottom-up perspective is very challenging in a bureaucracy where, the folks that you're working with, they have no incentive to take a risk on a group of students, to work on like a 6-figure project. And so really the long story short is, you should start from a bottom up maybe, but don't spend all your time on that, because at the end of the day, when you want to do sort of interesting or cool things, that requires you to go straight to someone like the provost. And I think the provost, at least at UIUC, is the right way to go, because the provost is, still really not too far out from their professor days. So they've worked with students intimately before. They have a charge of, academic excellence, to promote academic excellence. And so that's the kind of person who can make things happen. And from that point, things started to move really quickly. And it still ended up actually being the right move to go with a nonprofit, because it allowed us to be a lot more dynamic, and make quick decisions on the fly without having to, get XYZ signed and, all these different things. Even though we were in with a nonprofit, there was still a regulatory process that we set up where all the money that would get transferred to our nonprofit, every time we transferred money from any sort of school account to the nonprofit, every time that happened, like the CFO for the U of I system had to sort of sign a contract with us, sort of detailing, different requirements and whatnot. So that's how we did it. Is that like a long-term sustainable strategy? I don't think so, actually. There has been some talk, at least when I was president last year, about developing a new kind of student organization. So at U of I, they call them RSOs, registered student organizations. The proposal, I think, was to make something called like a university student organization, where the student organization is formally considered a part of the university, whereas RSOs are actually not legally considered part of the university. And I think the USO concept is by far, for design and build teams, the way to go. And importantly, UIUC will not be doing this, I think, for the vast majority of student organizations, but definitely for design and build organizations, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I see. So just to be clear, when we started, uh, we were looking for both either university owned and or non-for-profit owned. There are pros and cons of each option, because if you are non-for-profit, a lot of initially when we were working, a lot of university funds couldn't be accessed through that, and then we gave like couple of months of time that by October 2019, if we don't raise enough fund, we'll go with the university route. But then when we go with the university route, we lose control over where the house is located, who will own the house, what will be the end purpose. So that's why we went through that route, and ultimately, after some discussions and because of liability things, ultimately we ended again with the non-for-profit route. So for future team, I think it looks like it's a clear path where start a non-for-profit route at the beginning of the project and do fundraising accordingly, right?
No, so I'm saying, um, I mean, I suppose that I suppose that is one take, like that could be the takeaway from what I'm saying. I actually think that in general, the way that it probably should be is that it should be a university student organization. And I think that path is not clear at this point. So actually, I guess maybe you're right. Maybe the way to, until that becomes a very clear path where the student organization still maintains a lot of like discretion and ability and authority about what happens with their project, maybe the takeaway is to sort of just do these projects with start a nonprofit right away. But to be like, just like starting the nonprofit is very difficult. And who knows, maybe the university was okay doing that because there was a lot, quite frankly, I put a lot of pressure that, hey, this is the way that we're going to do this. And they sort of recognized that there was a time, there was not infinite time here, and that we had a project that we needed to get working on, and that this is that the nonprofit was the only way that was going to work. So maybe I don't know what they think behind the scenes. Maybe they're not inclined to do that. But I guess maybe that is the takeaway uh, um, if the USO concept is not sort of solidified. But doing the nonprofit route is a lot of work. I mean, because you have to think about it, like it means every year someone has to file like 990 forms, which are a pain. There's a lot of requirements that come along with it that are not ideal. Yet, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, like I'm just thinking because the next president, vice president, and the project manager should know and be better prepared, because like our non-for-profit was a bit late in the timeline and things were
Yeah.
being rushed. So if they are starting at least like, okay, maybe start USO process, but also parallelly, maybe like I think start with the getting bigger grants and sponsorship in mind, because if you have, let's say, a good amount of money to build the project without university grants, then maybe like you don't need USO, and you can just farm a non for profit. But there are also, like, as we face, a lot of time and formal work goes into it, so having a dedicated person in the team working on that aspect would be required.
And then can I ask a question with the
Well,
nonprofit?
if I could just really quick clarify on that. On the university funds thing, we did need university grants, like the Student Sustainability Committee, for example. That was university money. There was plenty of departments, and we wouldn't have had enough if we didn't have that. So it's not a matter of like doing it through the university or doing it through a nonprofit. It's not necessarily a question of like, do you need university money? We do need university money.
In any case, for travel and other grants. Okay, I thought like,
Yeah.
what if we had like 2 or 3 sponsors like IC, and it covers up also the travel cost. But yeah, it's you were saying something, Rose.
Yeah. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
no worries. I had a question with the nonprofit. So, what are the issues then of creating a new nonprofit versus transferring soul homes into the next project?
Yeah. So a few answers. Real quick, I should mention previously that when the provost sort of like got behind us, that was both monetary, but it was also regulatory, if that makes sense. And then Associate Provost Tomaszewski, who was sort of our saving grace, I think, throughout the process of working behind the scenes for us. He had offered. He had basically convened a large meeting about a year and 4 months or a year and 5 months, something like that ago. And the offer was on the table that we could do the project through the university. And I told him that I thought that was a generous offer, that was, I think, not the best way to move forward with the project because we wouldn't be dynamic enough. Thank God we did that, I think, because who knows if COVID would have made things more challenging because the university had to really restrict a lot of funds. Anyway, Rose, to answer your question, to be quite honest, Soul Homes, I would like to continue working with Soul Homes on the side, on the side of whatever I'm doing sort of professionally, and pivot it to do clean energy development work internationally. And so that's why Soul Homes, at least as far as I'm concerned, is not going to sort of carry over to the next project.
Did you
but
bring this up to the Council of Soul Homes?
yeah, that's
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, go ahead.
well, actually, I did. But there's another email coming at some point, Mayor. Yeah, so there's like a board for Soul Homes. I guess maybe I should talk about the board. So the board is Michael Cooper, me, Mayor, and Akash, and then Shashi was gonna be added to it as well. We have to figure out basically, I think, sort of who wants to be involved in that and moving forward, and that's another thing that I have to email everyone about. But yeah, those are all things to do.
Yeah, I think the important point we discussed when we formed this board was many people like uh, after graduation, depending on their time commitment, it it might be challenging to maintain. Like if at all we own the house, the Soul Homes own the house, we had to take care about maintenance and liability reasons, and that's why one of the route we thought that we could like dissolve the non-for-profit once the house is donated. But it looks like if in future, if we continue to build more houses, maybe transferring and forming new board could be a way where we can reduce the paperwork and also do uh, some international projects through that organization. But that's a discussion for another time.
Can
So
I add a
yeah,
couple
go ahead.
points? Sorry. I think like one of the issues we ran in with like creating a nonprofit kind of later in the game was like applying to grants and not having tax exempt status. So like I kind of like I think in terms of like fundraising and sponsorship, sometimes having alternatives early is better. Like later, we had a situation like later in terms of like a product sponsorship that fell through that we could tell was like becoming more of an issue. And so kind of like being proactive and like seeing if things are kind of shaky to just like act on it instead of waiting. That would kind of be something I would add.
That's a great point, and it actually like practically made sense, or pragmatically made like that pragmatically came into effect because our biggest grantor, like they, like Nabro said, they required a tax exempt status, and we were like waiting to hear back from the IRS, but we couldn't accept the funds because of the tax exempt status, even though they had already sort of approved, like they'd already granted us, we won a grant. And it ended up meaning that because like our tax exempt status came in like 2 weeks later than we wanted it to have, it meant that we had to transfer those funds from the foundation that we got the grant from to U of I to Soul Homes, which added a long time that actually was like relevant in the cash flow for the project. And so like that delay was problematic, and that would have been avoided if we had filed for tax exemption 2 weeks or 3 weeks earlier or something like that. I don't remember exactly what the dates was. So yeah, getting started early. The other thing is, if you do start with a nonprofit, like if you just do say like, okay, like we're starting a project in case the USO thing doesn't work out, let's start a nonprofit. You definitely have to get a lawyer to do it, and that should be pro bono. So definitely don't pay a lawyer to do it, but definitely have a lawyer do it.
And could you clarify when Soul Homes was formed?
Very late. So I think Soul Homes was formally recognized as a nonprofit in the state of Illinois.
I
Late,
it's
I
pretty,
think January 28th, 2021. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was something that had been discussed like a year prior, and yeah, I probably should have seen this coming and started that and done that, like, you know, several months prior, but I was sort of holding out that going through the university would be the best option, but yeah.
Okay. Now I would like to like talk some tips for doing on contacting sponsors. So I think definitely the future team should contact IC, SSC funds, and also going to different conferences, especially like energy related, and for product sponsors, architecture and civil engineering conferences help, but for bigger grant, energy conferences help. And if you can get in touch with the big names in the industry, and if they start talking or sharing about their project, it can develop many more relationship through that route. So definitely encourage team members and also folks in the sponsorship team to travel and visit more conferences.
So I think sometimes working more to get more money is better than kind of like doing the easy way to get like $500. It's like worth putting in the effort to get more because it's more efficient that way.
I agree with that. I also think it's important to put somebody in charge to be the champion of sponsorship early. Probably after the first semester or at some point during the first semester, someone should be put in charge of that. It doesn't need to be at the beginning of the project, but it does need to be no more than, I would say, if it's like 6 months in and you don't have someone, I would say if it's 5 months in and you don't have someone who's like the champion of sponsorship, it's a problem. The Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation has been our biggest source of funds. They like us a lot, although there were challenges from past projects that didn't have really great end use cases like we have now with Habitat for Humanity, and they definitely value that. However, I don't remember exactly how long it is now. I forgot. They were started from an endowment through ComEd, I think it was. Yeah, through ComEd, I'm pretty sure, which is the electric power utility in the Chicago area. That endowment's running out, so I think they're gonna have to close up their doors relatively soon. I don't remember exactly how long that is, but I think it could be like as soon as in 2 years. So I think the next project should look into it, might have an opportunity to get one last source of funding. And you obviously don't have to apply with a grant and it's very competitive, et cetera. But like, I'm being pretty confident that we could do that. And then, but it's possible that they don't have any money. So that's something to keep in mind. And they were a huge funder for ours. So that's pretty significant. The alternative is that we also applied for a grant with ComEd. Nava, Haley, do you remember what it was called? Energy Excellence, something or other.
Constellation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Constellation is like, okay, so Exelon is a larger parent company that owns ComEd. They also have a company called Constellation, which is like the company, it's not a utility company, it's like a company that operates in like competitive power markets. And they have this grant program like Energy Excellence, something like that, or Education for Excellence or something like that, through Constellation. We got a lot of money from them, although I'll sort of just give the caveat that it was an order of magnitude, actually exactly an order of magnitude below what we got from the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation, but it was still a lot of money from Constellation. And I don't know this for a fact, but from my conversations with the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation, it sounds to me like ComEd and or Exelon / Constellation is more interested in sort of keeping their grant programs now internally than sort of doing this external endowment where, you know, the foundation gives out the funds. The problem with that is ComEd is in Chicago, and we reached out to, I mean, Akash and I early on did do a lot of legwork. I mean, we were, you know, going to conferences and stuff like that, trying to raise funds. And we had approached ComEd, or Nava, were you running sponsorship when we approached ComEd? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
We approached ComEd, and I think the answer we got was just like, sorry, you're not in our service territory, because we're in Ameren's service territory. And for whatever reason, Ameren was not able to give us any funds. So it's definitely, that's a cause for concern, I'm not gonna lie. And I think what it means is we have to apply to the Constellation grant again, and we should apply for more money, because now we've got a successful project with them. We should also make sure that we, you know, relay the good news about our project to them, stay in good graces and stuff like that. I think fostering those like relationships with foundations that give you funds is super important. There's nothing worse than being a grantor and just sort of like giving money, and you only get at, like, you only hear from these folks when they need more money. So like, for example, you know, when we reached out, when Akash and I reached out to the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation, we gave them a 15-page report before we even applied, explaining to them why our new project will be much better about sort of post-competition and use cases. I should change it. Akash wrote a 15-page report about that. And so like, that's because I think in the past, like, we were not good enough about maintaining a good relationship with them. And also they hadn't heard from us in a while because we weren't doing US competitions.
Okay.
Also, one last thing, it means that we need to be very cognizant of when Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation does close their doors, because it might mean we need to apply for that grant earlier in the process than we might otherwise.
Yeah, I think they have like 2 or 3 times they open the window, and I think one important point I
Twice.
want to bring up is there should be a person, either the president or someone from the new like board from non-for-profit, solely responsible for the cash flow, because getting grant money is one thing, but adjusting it to the cash required for paying to contractor, because a lot of time these grants are reimbursed rather than they pay upfront. So how do you manage? Do you have enough money in hand to start and do the initial payment to the contractor, and stuff like that also should be uh, taken into consideration.
Great
I,
point.
I think also adding to what Jonas said in the beginning, was like in terms of like like designating a sponsorship person early on, but also like a sponsorship team. Because I know Akash was like kind of working by himself with Jonah and Mayor, but like, and then I took his position, and it wasn't until like this semester we brought on our last election, we brought on Rose and Tasha, and that was just like really helpful. And I think we were a lot more efficient. And like in terms of picking people to be the sponsorship team, I think a lot of students are like afraid to reach out to companies, and like finding people who are really willing to do it, and will just like step up and be and take initiative is super helpful, because it's like not so much a one-man job. I like Haley did a lot of grants, so I think like delegating a lot of those tasks are important.
And I would like to ask Haley now about what was the exact role in helping out the project this year, and how do you envision the future exec board's role?
So my exact role this year was mainly being the treasurer, and I applied to a lot of grants and I wrote a lot. And it almost felt like I was like taking a writing class, just like the amount that I needed, like wording everything perfectly to make it seem like we were like this perfect organization, and like I know we're deserving of that money, but it was like, like just really polishing everything up was really difficult. But at the end, it obviously really worked out. And I also, grants were mainly written, like I wrote it for external funding sources, but I also was in charge of the internal funding. So applying to like the engineering funding cycles as well as the university RSO funding cycles. And the second part of your question, what do I envision the future? I am planning on being a part of exec for the beginning of this next project. And to be honest, I don't know what I envision just because I have only been involved with the build team project specifically for 1 year. So I have not seen the process of getting this project started, finding the proper funding, just because I came in at a time when the competition was delayed a year. So everything was already sorted out, and it was up to me to kind of figure out and sort through the obstacle that was presented to us in September. And that was like my main role, is to make sure we have enough funding. But I never really got to see the process. So I really have no expectations. And I guess that's something I'll figure out this summer, like talking to everyone who's been through the process.
Yeah, like uh, I'll just briefly share how we went. So our time frame was we had Sula Decathlon China in summer of 18. Then this guys came back. A new board was formed from exec. There was president and vice president. Those people circulated emails in a lot of departments about opening of project manager position, and they interviewed few candidates, and then I was selected. And after that, there was another round of like recruit formation of team, and this was like it took a month or two in fall for the interview process and finalization of project manager. But by that time, the exec board was doing recruiting events and giving lectures in various departments. For quad day, we got a lot of entries of interested people. So once the project manager was elected, we had a good amount of people, interested students in the database to start with. And for leads, it was many students had past involvement in design projects. So we gave some opportunity to people who had already worked in solar decathlon projects and gave them more responsibilities. But the first challenge the team faces would be, in our time it was first submission due in around December, where we had to submit a 20-page report of whether the university or the team is capable enough to do the project, what's the core concept, do we have enough strength and students to finish this project. And that will decide out of a lot of applications whether we are selected for the next build challenge. And that was one crunch time where we had to pull up a lot of work. And then after that, in February, there is another round for bigger funding approval from DOE. So this time they had local and national build teams where they had different range of funding, amount of funding. And then we went to Denver and got the bigger funding approval. So that segues to the point I wanted to communicate about the team structure and the formation. I think this time the roles were quite mingled and everyone took care about the responsibilities very well, but at times it was hard. So when I was the project manager, like I got a lot of support from, like earlier in the project, from Akash, who was the sponsorship head, and later Chris also helped. But ideally, there should be a project manager who solely focus on the managerial aspect and competition coordination, and a project engineer. That person is responsible for the technical aspect and interdisciplinary design coordination. And then assistant project manager, if you guys have more folks, because at a time, and also I think uh, whatever we have, like project manager or assistant project manager, s- either of those positions, preferably, uh, from my two times of build challenge, one should be from architecture background because of the client research, different types of building technology and building science knowledge, and one should be from civil engineering background because of the contracts, the project, and uh, all the feasibility side of things. And there could be like from any department a project manager, but someone with a good construction knowledge of both design and engineering. And I have seen where in the past where there was a project manager from engineering, and many times they don't connect with the architectural design aspect, because there'll be when things are not moving fast, if that person doesn't have structural or architecture knowledge, they think we design the system in a week, why are other teams taking 2 months to design? But if they know what are the challenges of that discipline, they can understand the problem very well and do their best to help the sub teams to solve those problems. So that would be my recommendation, that having a project manager and assistant project manager with some in professional experience and holistic knowledge would help in long term. Next is, I would say, r- currently the exec board members, the marketing uh, director was helping in build team, but in future maybe having a separate communication director for build team would help, and a few graphics folks, because during submission we need to put up a lot of documents. So having a person working solely on communication part, getting very high detailed and formatted submissions will help in long term.
The good news is that Nolan is interested in helping us in the future.
Can I speak to this too?
That's great. Yeah.
Shout out Daniel White,
Yeah.
who was an urban planning student who was on our team, and he would basically take everyone's work and make the submissions in like a 24-hour period of just straight work. And so that, one of the things that I think ISD has always been could always do better in is setting hard deadlines like a week prior. We always talk about it. We always make the deadlines, and then if they don't actually happen, I don't know how to do that properly. I tried. I was not successful. But yes, I think having a communications director, and that means like from the get-go, not like I think there's always this sort of idea that like you can do that, for when the competition actually happens, but people don't realize like you actually have to make these documents look really nice and well formatted and whatnot. And so that has to happen right away.
Yeah.
The other thing,
Go ahead.
sorry, the other thing I was going to say is like, as far as selecting a project manager, you can't rush it. And that also means you should start very early in the process. Like we should start that process after your finals, basically. Start recruiting people. You want to get a good number of applicants, but again, you also want that selection to be made like very early on in the school year, so that that they can get started right away. Because there's also like, you're mentioning like recruiting activities. Hats off to this year's exec board for managing to do that during COVID. But it's hard, and you might come away from like quad day with like 300 names and think you're set. And like, that does not mean that, certainly doesn't mean 300 people. It doesn't mean that 100 people, it doesn't mean 50 people will show up actually. So you need well into the hundreds, and then you need to really like keep on people, because like, I think there's also like sometimes an expectation like, oh, well, if they're good, then they'll just show up, whatever. I'm like, sure, sometimes that's the case. But sometimes like you actually just need to make sure, with emails and reaching out to people, that they actually show up. And then, they might really like it. And all of a sudden you have like a dedicated member you wouldn't have otherwise had. So, yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I should have mentioned Daniel White, and he's an amazing guy to work with. Like I used to spend a lot of time before submission, and he not only arranged and formatted all the documents, but he made the language very professional and compelling. And that was one thing which we uh, struggled a bit in when he left, and we there was like no one like from business or marketing background was really good at writing compelling content for the submission. So it would be good if we can identify someone who is good at that part. uh, I would like to mention that for future there is potential for improvement in general meetings and social events, because that those impact a lot in team bonding activities, and it felt like we had a bit lesser presence in social activities, and things could be changed to improve that.
Yeah, that's something I wish I had been able to. That I think actually one of my biggest regrets when I was president, that I felt like, much to like um I tried to make it be sort of more of like a familial environment, or like, like fun, but it felt, I agree, right? It felt like a company almost. It was not it didn't have the feeling that you wanted. And so I think that was definitely something that I think somehow, I don't even know how this is possible, but I feel like somehow even during COVID, that's actually improved. Um, but that's just my perception.
All right, looks like you haven't attended team meetings, but m- I think don't do like a generic social events, but like I think we went for a hike in summer with all the few of the leads and the exec board, and that was a good bonding. I was supposed to release a vlog, which I should have edited, but that's another point. Uh, Focus more on because if team members are motivated and everyone feels like a family, the project is fun to work with, and there will be a time when things will get very busy, things are not falling into place. So I would say the exec should also provide some mental support to the team members, because like if the the team leads or the project manager gets busy, then maybe helping them temporarily for that time period becomes important, because there are different phases of the project. So exec board should be prepared to help, and like having more involvement from exec in the project definitely helps. Cool. I would like to do a last round of run through, like what is one or two tips you'd like to give to future team members.
I'd like to say be really open. I felt like I came on last year in May to this project, not really knowing what I was going to do with it. But it's really what you make out of it. So you can take on as much responsibility as you want to, and people are going to notice that if you're more keen to taking on tasks. So this organization is everything that you put into it. So if you want to do a lot with it, you will be able to. But if you don't put in any effort, you're going to be on the sidelines. There's so many people in this organization where if you're not doing a lot into it, you can stay on the side and kind of not be heard in the organization. But if you really put your foot in there and kind of reach out to exec and even just reaching out to your team lead and trying to get involved in any way possible, you're going to grow so much professionally and you're going to learn so much and you're going to meet incredible people through this organization. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice.
Awesome.
This might be a little crazy to say, but I would say like sometimes just like make a decision and go with it. I think like before COVID, we had a completely different contractor, and I think like kind of living through this project through the COVID era kind of taught me just to go with the flow and to just like choose something, and you never know that it's actually going to like happen. But yeah, like kind of take the project as it is and as it's going.
I see. Gianna or Haley?
What
Yeah,
are
I'm
you,
gonna.
Myler?
I'll say two things. I think the first thing to Rose's point is sort of for like leaders of ISD, identify those people that sort of want to get more involved. Doesn't matter if they're on build or design or whatever. Those are the people that will be the leaders in a year or two, and give them responsibilities. Make a new role on exec. Like, feel free to do those things because it actually it makes the team better. What I was going to say though is sort of my take on a little bit. I think about what Nava was getting at, which is like make a decision, but also like I actually think throughout like this type of a project, there's often a lot of like what you think are crises that are like do or die, whatever, and you're always sort of like there's always seems this pressure to send that email now or you know, like make a decision in the moment, whatever, when in reality whatever you perceive to be a crisis in the moment, you know, this is something that like I was not good at. Michael Cooper was very good at, is to sort of just keep a calm head, take a day to think about something, you know, like and so I think doing that, like having perspective and not treating everything as a crisis, even if it seems as though it is, that's my advice.
Mhm.
I feel like there's so much I've taken away. It's like so hard to like just pinpoint one thing, but just like this past year, I feel like I know that like there's so much attention that goes into build team. Just because it's like the magnitude of the project is like a lot. But I feel like for future exec or especially for exec to like not forget about design team. I feel like I've thought about that a lot because especially during competition, like it was all about build team, but I definitely think design team got neglected. And I know that there's so many like really hardworking people that have so much potential to be like future like exec leaders or that kind of stuff. But if maybe we would have focused in a lot more on like the whole team itself, not just build team, like we could have been more like unified. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel there is also like some knowledge exchange that can be done from build to design, which can save them a lot of resources in terms of time and also knowledge. But I totally agree, like both teams should win, design and build, and that should be like not will but also like make an impact in the community and do innovative research. That's one of the vision I had, that uh, students take risk, learn more, and make a change in the community. One advice I have, I think I remember there were few times where we had the difficult talk for the project, and one night we met in Granger. We had to release funding for Scander, and we didn't know the construction costs for the local contractor. And there was that time where we had to make a call: should we do 3 modules versus 2 modules, and cutting down pros and cons. And that was another difficult decision to make. And after a point when university uh, legal aspect and other things were not working out, it was very like couple of weeks of time difference where we had to make a call: should we inform the team members that we can't do this project anymore, and we had to completely forget about all the work we did. but, but fortunately we kept on working and things figured out. The new contractor came in, the ownership of the house sorted out. So definitely if- have someone who can be calm in those decision. And being resilient is one of the thing I learned from this project. And um, i I hope I was able to like motivate the team members during those times to keep it going. But uh, yeah, I think you guys correct like pointed out a few of the points I wanted to mention. As leaders, once you identify the champions in your team, your job is to produce new leaders, not end up doing all the work by yourself. So providing more responsibility to those people who are passionate to do change is one of the thing you should work on. And yeah, all right, I think
Akash,
that
Mayor. Um, one thing I was, or two things I was going to mention is like Akash was really good at doing that, at developing other leaders. And then the other thing I was going to say is to the point you made about that Granger conversation. I think the lesson that I learned from that was it's really important to have people on the team who are comfortable telling you exactly what they think. And it's important for the president or project manager or whomever to make sure that they foster a team environment where that happens and to listen when that happens. Because on the 3 module decision, like in hindsight, that was a perfectly, it made so much sense to go from 3 to 2. That made so much sense. But it just sort of didn't occur to me that that was an option almost, if that makes sense. It was just sort of not on my radar. And I think it took Chris maybe 10 seconds to convince me about that. Even if I knew within 10 seconds that he was right. Maybe it took me like 2 minutes to say that out loud, but I knew right away that he was totally right. So
yeah, but yeah, I think one of the key takeaway from that conversation is like, don't jump into the conclusion that okay, we have not enough money so don't build. There are other possible solutions to the problem you have in hand. So 2 module was one of the way we figured out to move ahead rather than closing everything. So always when there are crises, think about 2 or 3 solutions, and have members and leads like provide like full transparency. I think that is one thing where for a period of time, we didn't keep our funds and grants as transparent. But then we got feedback from the leads that they wanted to know what's going on with the funding, how much money we have and stuff. And then we started sharing more numbers with them, and that helped to even them to get more confidence in the project that they are just not working. There's things going on at the exact level which they should be aware of.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's something that I made a mistake on, because, I was sort of like, I didn't want folks to be sort of like concerned or worried about it. Like I wanted that to be like, um, they already had enough on their plate. But then at one point, sort of the leads were like, wait, we want to know. And so that was a good learning experience.
Yeah. One tip I have for future project manager or even like exec, uh, I I used to do this more often in last summer, having like a monthly or bi-monthly feedback meeting from team members and leads, where we used to criticize what are some things in the team meeting which is not efficient. And like if you join in the project, like the 2 hours meeting has been made very productive and cut down to like 30 minutes chunk and 30 minutes other work. And that all came through like honest feedback from the leads. So as from exec or project manager, they should be very friendly and open for feedback from the leads, and that could improve a lot of things when you start building the project. Cool. I think we almost reached an hour mark, and it was quite uh, insightful discussion. And thanks a lot, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. I hope this would be useful to future members, not only from Illinois, but anyone from Build Team all over the world.
Thank you for organizing this. It was really helpful.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.
Yeah,
Good
good
night.
good idea, Mayor. Good night.